Welcome to Pixelated Zen presents Nostalgialess. I'm your host Krovlar, and this is The Amazing Spider-Man for the original Game Boy. Developed by Rare, of Banjo-Kazooie fame, and published by LJN, of Terrible Games fame, The Amazing Spider-Man came out for the Game Boy in 1990 and was one of the earliest games for that system. For an early 90s game, and a Game Boy game at that, the story is pretty good. A group of Spider-Man's villains have learned his secret identity and have kidnapped Mary Jane in order to force Spider-Man to track them down and, one by one, beat the living hell out of them. Seems like a stupid idea to me. At the beginning of every stage, you get a little scene of you talking to the stage boss over a walkie-talkie. But it's like the writers didn't want to mention anyone by name. Like they lost the rights to the characters at the last minute and you're just given nicknames the entire time. The only person referred to by their actual name is Mary Jane. It's fine for someone like me, who knows these characters inside and out, but anyone coming at this from a not Spidey fan club member point of view would have no idea who these characters were. For one of the early Spider-Man games, though, it's really not that terrible. The controls are pretty standard. A jumps, B punches. If you're in the air or ducking, B kicks. If you're standing still and you hold down B, you'll shoot out one of 3 types of web shot. You have no control over this, though. If you're moving and you press A, you should double jump. If you hold A down, you should start web swinging. On the subject of webs, you have web cartridges, and each one contains a finite amount of web fluid. Web fluid. We had a big budget Hollywood movie that didn't have web fluid. We had 3 of them. Thankfully, the new one did a lot right and brought web fluid back into the mix. Back to the controls though. The problem is that the double jump and the web swinging just don't work. It's a crapshoot whether you're going to double jump or not. And even if you do, it's likely that you're not going to shoot a web line and swing from it afterward. It's like the game flips a coin, and if it lands on heads you get to double jump, tails you don't. Tails comes up a lot. For the most part though, this isn't a big deal, but there is one level toward the end of the game that contains a ton of super jumping and web swinging, just to get to the end boss, Dr. Octopus, who then requires super jumping to defeat him. Speaking of long distance web swinging, remember that web fluid I mentioned earlier? Yep. If you run out while you're swinging, you'll fall down and die. That's kinda cool, but it's annoying as hell as well. Sometimes, if you've gotten far enough, it'll actually move you to the next building, which is nice. Other times, it won't. And once you do get to Doc Ock, oh, that's a blast. You see, there's this platform over Doc Ock's head that you're supposed to super jump to in order to run to the other side of him and start attacking again. The problem, well, you guessed it. Good luck getting the super jump to work. On top of that, you get no period of invulnerability in this game. So if you're forced to jump through the good doctor, your health will be drained every second part of your character is touching part of him. Each boss is at the end of a level, of which there are 6 in the game. There are 3 types though. You get the traditional side-scrolling levels on the ground, 2 vertical levels where Spider-Man is scaling the side of a building, and then 2 rooftop levels that require super jumps and web swinging. On the subject of bosses, most of them are extremely easy, much easier than the stages leading up to them. Like most of the time with bosses, you simply have to watch the boss, figure out its pattern, and then take him down. With The Amazing Spider-Man, the boss patterns are very simple, which means that I usually figured them out within the first few seconds, and I was eventually able to beat every boss the first time I ran across them without losing any lives. All except for the last boss, Venom, who rocked my world like you would not believe. Now, you may be watching the footage and saying, hey, for the most part, you seem to be kicking ass. Controls seem fine. And for the most part, they're not bad. That and I played for around 6 hours just to get enough footage for this review, and by the end, I got an entire playthrough down to about 16 minutes. Needless to say, I got pretty good at the game. The only real issue I have with the controls is that the damnable super jump and web swinging just don't work most of the time. And that's something you shouldn't get wrong in a Spider-Man game. On the subject of graphics, for a 1990s Game Boy game, they aren't too bad. I could tell who all the characters were pretty easily, except for Scorpion, who looks pretty damned awful. I've heard some people bash the graphics of this game, but I really don't think they know what a 1990s Game Boy game looks like. For reference, here are some screen captures from DuckTales, Double Dragon, and Batman. Speaking of Batman, the bats and the birds in this game were a really weird call, and it feels like they just added them in there because platformers always have bats and birds that fly at you in a sine wave pattern. It's like a law or something. Spider-Man himself looks pretty good, except for a slight hunch that makes me worry about his future health conditions. He's got a Spider-Man emblem on his back too, which I really didn't think they would add, and you can only really see it while he's web swinging, but it's a nice touch. Honestly, I can say that, web swinging and jumping aside, the game really isn't bad for an early 90s Game Boy licensed game. That's not to say it's particularly good, and while I had a fair amount of fun, I'm ready to move on and see what's next in the Spider-Man chronology. Tune in next time for the Amazing Spider-Man vs. Kingpin for the Sega Genesis.